thought love was supposed to be safe. That when someone promised forever, they meant it. For 3 years, I trusted Ethan with my heart, believing he was my future. He was my best friend, my safe place, my everything. But love has a cruel way of proving you wrong. It started with small things, the way he pulled away, the unanswered texts, the excuses. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew something was off. I just never imagined that the truth would be far worse than I could ever prepare for. One night, when he canceled our plans, I did something I had never done before. I showed up at his apartment unannounced. But his car wasn't there, and neither was my sister's. I told myself I was crazy, that my mind was playing tricks on me. Until I drove across town and saw them, sitting together at a cafe, holding hands, looking at each other the way he used to look at me. My sister. The person I trusted the most. The person who was supposed to protect me, not steal the man I loved. That night, my world fell apart. But what I didn't know then was that this wasn't just a story about heartbreak. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Because sometimes, when life rips everything away from you, it forces you to find the one thing you should have had all along. Yourself. The betrayal I never saw coming. Love was supposed to be beautiful. It was supposed to be safe, constant, unbreakable. At least that's what I thought when I was with Ethan. For 3 years, he made me believe in forever, in stolen kisses under city lights, in whispered I love yous over late-night calls, in the way he held me close like he'd never let go. But love, I learned too late, can be a cruel illusion. Because the man I loved, the man I had planned my future with, chose my sister instead. And the worst part? I never saw it coming. The perfect love story, or so I thought. I met Ethan when I was 19. I was still in college, full of dreams, full of ideas about love that I had learned from movies and books. The kind of love where you meet someone and just know. And when I met Ethan, I thought I knew. He was older than me by 3 years, confident, charming in that effortless way that made him impossible to ignore. I had seen him across the campus cafe a few times before we actually spoke. But when he finally sat beside me one day and introduced himself, it felt like something had shifted inside me. From that moment, we were inseparable. Long drives with the windows down, singing to our favorite songs. Late-night calls where we talked about everything and nothing at the same time. His hand always reaching for mine, as if to remind me that I was his. I believed in him. I believed in us. And for 3 years, I thought he did too. The first signs of a lie. Looking back, I wonder if my heart always knew the truth before my mind could accept it. There were signs, small ones, so easy to miss at first. Like how Ethan would sometimes pause just a little too long when my sister Claire walked into the room. How he would laugh a little too hard at her jokes, even when they weren't that funny. How their conversations always felt just a little too natural, as if they shared something I wasn't part of. But I never questioned it. Why would I? Claire was my sister. She was my best friend, my protector, the one person in the world I thought would always have my back. I trusted her. I trusted them both. And that was my first mistake, the night that shattered everything. I should have known something was wrong when Ethan started pulling away. The texts became shorter, the calls became less frequent. And then came the excuses. Just busy with work, babe. Sorry, I can't make it tonight, I'm exhausted. Let's hang out soon, I promise. And I believed him. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that he was just stressed, that everything would go back to normal if I just gave him space. Then, one night, he canceled our dinner plans. Not feeling great, he texted, going to stay in tonight. I was already dressed, excited to see him, and for a second, disappointment flashed through me. But then, my concern took over. "Do you need anything? Medicine? Food?" I replied. No answer. That's when I made the worst decision of my life. I grabbed my keys, picked up some soup, and drove to his apartment. Not to check up on him. Not because I didn't trust him. But because I loved him. And when you love someone, you take care of them. But when I got there, his car was gone. And so was Claire's. The moment I knew I had lost him. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe Claire was just visiting a friend. Maybe Ethan had gone out for medicine or food. I tried calling him. No answer. I tried calling Claire. Straight to voicemail. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. I told myself I was overreacting, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But something inside me whispered, "You already know." I started driving. And somehow, I ended up at a small cafe across town, a place Ethan once mentioned he loved because it was quiet, private. I don't know what made me stop there. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was fate. All I know is that when I looked through the window, I couldn't breathe, because there they were. Ethan, Claire. Sitting across from each other, their hands intertwined, their faces lit up with laughter. And then I watched Ethan reach across the table and tuck a strand of Claire's hair behind her ear. The way he used to do to me. My world collapsed. I wanted to storm in, scream, demand an explanation, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, my heart breaking in real time as I watched the two people I trusted most fall in love at my expense. The breaking point. I don't remember the drive home. All I remember is lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was drowning. How long had this been going on? Did everyone know but me? Was I ever really special to him? By the time morning came, I wasn't sure who I hated more. Him for betraying me, or myself for never seeing it coming. And that's when I realized this wasn't just heartbreak. This was something deeper, something darker. Because when the people you love betray you, they don't just break your heart, they break who you are. Drowning in betrayal. Betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it rewires your soul. One moment, you're a person who believes in love, in loyalty, in forever. The next, you're someone else entirely. Someone who knows that forever is a lie. And that the people you trust the most are the ones who can destroy you the fastest. The morning after the storm. I didn't sleep, not even for a second. I lay in bed, my mind replaying every single moment of the past 3 years, searching for signs I had missed. There had to be something, a clue, a warning, anything that should have told me Ethan wasn't really mine. But all I could remember was how much I had loved him. How much I had trusted Claire. And how stupid that made me now. My phone sat on my nightstand, lighting up with texts. Ethan. Morning, babe. Ethan. Feeling okay? Ethan. Can I see you today? I stared at the screen, my body cold with disbelief. Was he serious? After everything? After I had watched him hold my sister's hand? After I had seen the way he looked at her, the way he used to look at me? How dare he act like nothing had changed? I had 2 options: confront him immediately, pretend I didn't know. At least, not yet. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, I chose the second. Pretending everything was normal. When I met Ethan later that day, he kissed me. His lips touched mine, but I felt nothing. Because I knew where those lips had been. Because I could still hear Claire's laughter ringing in my ears. "You seem quiet," Ethan said as we sat in his car. I forced a smile. Just tired. It was the first lie I ever told him. But not the last. The lies begin. For For the next few weeks, I played along. I smiled when he held my hand. I laughed at his jokes. I pretended I didn't notice when his phone screen lit up with Claire's name. I was waiting, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to see how long he would keep lying to me. How long he would look me in the eyes and tell me I was the only one, when I knew for a fact I wasn't. The moment I couldn't stay silent anymore. It happened at Sunday dinner. Our family gathered at my parents' house, the way we always did. Claire was there, and so was Ethan, sitting across from each other, sharing small glances they thought no one noticed. But I noticed. I watched everything. The way Claire bit her lip when he spoke. The way Ethan's fingers tapped against the table like he was nervous. The way my parents had no idea that the two people sitting across from them were slowly ripping me apart. And suddenly, I couldn't do it anymore. I slammed my fork down. The sound echoed through the dining room. Everyone turned to look at me. Ethan's eyes widened. Claire froze. I took a deep breath. "So," I said, keeping my voice calm, controlled. "How long have you two been sleeping together?" The silence that said everything. You could have heard a pin drop. My mother's jaw fell open. My father stiffened in his chair. Ethan went pale. "Claire?" She didn't move, because she knew. She knew she was caught. Ethan tried to laugh it off. "Babe, what are you talking about?" Wrong move. I pulled out my phone, opened my camera roll, and slid it across the table. A photo, taken outside the cafe that night. Claire, Ethan, holding hands like they belonged to each other. My mother gasped. My father clenched his fists. "And Claire?" Her lips parted in shock, not because she felt guilty, but because she hadn't expected me to have proof. "Oh my God," my mother whispered. Ethan reached for my hand. "Let me explain." I snatched my hand away. "No," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to look me in the eyes and lie to me again." His face crumpled. Claire spoke for the first time. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. I turned to her, my blood boiling. "You didn't mean to fall in love with my boyfriend?" I snapped. She swallowed hard. I never wanted to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. Funny, because that's exactly what you did. The end of us. I didn't stay for the rest of dinner. I didn't want to hear their excuses, their pathetic apologies. I walked out the door without looking back. Ethan followed me outside. "Please, just let me talk to you," he begged. I turned to face him, my heart pounding with anger, betrayal, and something I couldn't name. "Was she better than me?" I asked. Ethan's eyes widened. "What? No! It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Ethan? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you threw away 3 years for my sister." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." My voice cracked. "I love you," he whispered. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I wanted to believe him, but love doesn't feel like this. Love doesn't feel like watching the man you trusted hold someone else's hand. Love doesn't feel like being a second choice. I took a deep breath, and I said the hardest thing I had ever said. "I don't love you anymore." Ethan staggered back, like I had physically hit him. "You don't mean that," he whispered. But I did, because that night at the cafe, when I saw him with Claire, something inside me broke. And I knew I could never love him again. Not after this. Not after everything. Shattered bonds and unanswered questions. Some betrayals sting like a knife to the heart. Others? They burn everything you thought you knew to the ground. I had lost my boyfriend. I had lost my sister. And worst of all, I had lost the version of myself that believed in love, in trust, in family. because after this, I didn't believe in anything anymore. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up to dozens of missed calls. Ethan, 12 missed calls. Claire, 7 missed calls. Mom, 2 missed calls. I didn't answer any of them. Because what was there left to say? That I forgave them? That I understood? That I was okay? I wasn't. I wasn't okay at all, and I wasn't sure I ever would be again. Claire's last excuse. By noon, Claire showed up at my door. I didn't want to see her, but something in me needed answers. So I let her in. She stood in my living room, arms crossed, looking smaller than I had ever seen her before. "I know you hate me," she whispered. I didn't respond. Because hate wasn't a strong enough word. "How long?" I finally asked, my voice cold. Claire swallowed hard. A few months. I had spent the last 90 days loving a man who had already moved on. I clenched my fists. "Why, Claire? Was it fun for you, stealing something that was mine?" Her face twisted in pain. "It wasn't like that," she said. "I didn't plan for this to happen." I let out a bitter laugh. "Right. You just accidentally fell in love with my boyfriend." She flinched. "I fought it," she whispered. "I swear, I tried. But we connected. It felt real. Real." The word felt like poison. Because what we had, what Ethan and I had built for 3 years, that had felt real to me too. "So, what do you want?" I asked, my voice hollow. "My blessing? My forgiveness?" Claire looked away. "I just don't want to lose you." I stared at her, my chest tight. She didn't get it. She would never get it, because I had already lost her, and there was no coming back from this. "You already did," I whispered. And then I did what she should have done from the beginning. I walked away, Ethan's final goodbye. I avoided Ethan for days, but eventually I knew I had to face him too. Not for closure, not for answers, but because I needed to end this for good. So when he showed up at my apartment, I let him in. He looked awful. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair messy, like someone who had been losing sleep over what he did. Good. "I don't know where to start," he said, running a hand through his hair. I crossed my arms. "Try the truth." He sighed. "I never meant to hurt you." I rolled my eyes. "Stop saying that. Stop acting like this just happened. You made a choice, Ethan. A choice that destroyed me." He looked up, pain in his eyes. "I loved you," he said, voice thick with emotion. Loved, past tense. That one word sent a sharp pain through my chest. "And yet, you still left me for her," I whispered. Ethan reached for my hand. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way, but it did." I pulled away. "And now you have to live with it." He exhaled, shaking his head. "I miss you," he said. A part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to go back, to fix this, to pretend it never happened. But I knew better now. I knew that some things can't be fixed. Some love stories aren't meant to have happy endings. "I don't miss you," I said, my voice steady. His breath hitched. I took a deep breath. "I loved you, Ethan. I really did. But I'm done loving someone who never loved me enough to stay." He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't let him. I turned, grabbed the door handle, and looked back one last time. "Goodbye, Ethan." And then I closed the door on him forever. The first step toward healing. For weeks I felt hollow, like a ghost moving through my own life. Until one night, I found myself standing on the beach, staring at the waves crashing against the shore. The ocean didn't stop for anyone. Not for heartbreak, not for betrayal, not for me. And in that moment, I realized, neither should I. Ethan had taken so much from me. But he wasn't going to take my future too. So I took a deep breath, feeling the ocean breeze against my skin, and whispered the words that finally set me free. I forgive you, but I will never forget. Because love should never make you feel second best. And for the first time in months, I was finally learning how to put myself first. Rising from the ashes, they say time heals everything. But no one tells you how much time, no one tells you how many nights you'll spend staring at the ceiling, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. No one tells you how hard it is to rebuild yourself from the pieces of who you used to be. Because healing doesn't come all at once. It comes slowly, one painful step at a time. And that's what I was about to learn. The weight of an empty heart. In the weeks after Ethan and Claire's betrayal, I felt like I was sleepwalking through my own life. The pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. A hollow ache in my chest that refused to go away. I stopped answering texts, stopped going out, stopped believing that the world had anything left to offer me. Because when you lose the people you love, you don't just lose them. You lose the version of yourself that existed with them, and I didn't know how to be me without Ethan. Without Claire. Without the life I thought I was supposed to have. Everyone had an opinion. People talked, at work, in the grocery store. Even family friends who barely knew me. I can't believe Claire would do that to her own sister. Did you hear Ethan left her? Unbelievable. Poor girl, she must be devastated. I hated the pity. I hated feeling like a broken thing that people whispered about in passing, because I wasn't just a victim. I was more than this heartbreak. I just didn't know how to prove it yet. The unexpected message. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a text. Unknown number. Hey, I know this is random, but I just wanted to check in on you. I frowned, staring at the message. Who the hell was this? Me. Who is this? Unknown number. It's Jake, Ethan's friend. We met a few times. Jake. I vaguely remembered him, one of Ethan's old college buddies. I wasn't sure why he was reaching out. Maybe Ethan sent him. Maybe this was another cruel game. But before I could overthink it, another text popped up. Jake. I heard what happened. And for what it's worth, you deserve better. Something about those words made my chest tighten. Because no one had really said that to me yet. People pitied me. They whispered. They gossiped. But no one just told me the truth. I did deserve better. So for the first time in weeks, I smiled. And I replied, Thanks, Jake. That actually means a lot. A new beginning? Jake and I started talking more after that. It wasn't anything romantic, at least not at first. It was easy conversation, the kind that reminded me of what it felt like to just be myself again. What's the dumbest thing you've ever done? I once got stuck in a revolving door for a solid 5 minutes. That's impressive. I think you just beat my story about falling into a fountain. And just like that, he made me laugh again. For the first time since Ethan, since Claire, since my world fell apart, I felt something other than pain. I felt hope. The first time I saw Ethan again. I wasn't expecting it. I was at a coffee shop reading a book, finally enjoying a quiet moment. Then I looked up, and there he was, Ethan. Standing in line, looking just as surprised as I felt. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he took a step forward. Hey, he said softly. I nodded, my stomach tightening. I expected him to look happy, like a man who had won the prize he left me for. But instead, he looked miserable, tired, lost. And suddenly, for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't the one who was hurting the most. He was. What he wanted to say. "How are you?" he asked. I sipped my coffee. "I'm doing better." And it was the truth. Ethan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I messed up." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral. "Yeah," I said simply. "I thought she was... I don't know. I thought it was love." I raised an eyebrow. "And now?" He hesitated. "Now, I think I made the biggest mistake of my life." I blinked. For months, I had dreamed of this moment, of Ethan realizing he had made the wrong choice. But now that it was happening, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired, my final words to him. "You hurt me, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "I know. You broke me. I know. And I don't think I'll ever understand why you chose her over me." He looked down. Neither do I. For a moment, we just stood there. Two people who had once been everything to each other. Now nothing more than a lesson learned the hard way. Then I took a deep breath. "I forgive you," I said. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "You do?" I nodded. "But that doesn't mean I want you back." And then, for the first time in this entire painful, messy story, I walked away without looking back. The real love story. That night, I texted Jake. Not because I was ready to love again, not because I needed someone to fill the empty space Ethan left behind, but because I was finally ready to move forward. "Hey," I typed. "Want to grab coffee tomorrow?" His reply came almost instantly. "Only if you don't mind me getting stuck in another revolving door." And I laughed. Because for the first time in a long time, I was finally okay. Heartbreak doesn't heal overnight. It lingers in the empty spaces where someone used to be, in the way you reach for a hand that isn't there anymore, in the memories that resurface when you least expect them. But the thing about pain is, it doesn't last forever. And as much as I thought Ethan's betrayal would ruin me, I was finally starting to see the truth. I was going to be okay, letting go of the past. After my conversation with Ethan at the coffee shop, something inside me shifted. For months, I had been carrying his betrayal like a weight on my chest, letting it define me, control me. But now, I didn't feel that weight anymore. I wasn't the girl Ethan left for my sister. I was just me, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. So that night, I did something I had been putting off for weeks. I took a box out of my closet. Inside were all the little pieces of what used to be us. Photos, notes, the necklace he had given me on our 1-year anniversary. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of all the memories attached to it. Then, slowly, I placed it all in a bag and walked outside. With a deep breath, I dropped it into the trash. And just like that, I let him go. The first time I said yes. Jake and I kept talking. At first, it was just casual texts, but then, "I know this is random, but do you want to grab dinner sometime?" I stared at the message for a long time. I wasn't sure if I was ready. Ready to trust again? Ready to let someone in? Ready to be more than just the girl who got her heart broken? But then I thought about who I used to be before Ethan. A girl who believed in love. A girl who laughed without thinking. A girl who wasn't afraid to say yes to something new. And I realized I wanted to be her again. So I typed 2 simple words. "Sounds good." And I hit send. The date that wasn't a date. Jake took me to a small diner on the edge of town. "Nothing fancy," he had said, grinning. but they have the best fries in the city. And he wasn't wrong. It was the first time in months I sat across from someone and just existed. No heartbreak, no past hanging over me. Just a good conversation and fries that were way too greasy but perfect anyway. "So," Jake said, dipping a fry in ketchup, "are you going to tell me how you're really doing, or are we sticking to the 'I'm fine' story?" I raised an eyebrow. "And what makes you think I'm not fine?" He gave me a knowing look. "Because people who are fine don't hesitate before answering." I exhaled, shaking my head. "Okay, you got me. I'm getting there. Some days are good, some days aren't, but I don't wake up feeling like my world is ending anymore." He nodded. "That's a start." And the weird thing was, I believed him, because for the first time since everything happened, I wasn't just surviving. I was starting to live again. A familiar face. As we were leaving the diner, I felt it before I saw it. A pair of eyes watching me. I turned dash. And there she was, Claire. Standing by the entrance, holding a cup of coffee, her face pale as she saw me with someone else. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she took a hesitant step forward. "Hey," she said softly. Jake glanced between us, sensing the tension. "I'll wait in the car," he murmured before walking away, leaving me alone with the person who had hurt me more than anyone else in the world. "Claire's regret. You look good," she said awkwardly. "I feel good." She bit her lip. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again." "I don't." That surprised her. For so long, I had been the one hurt, the one broken. I don't think she ever expected me to be okay without her. "I never wanted to lose you," Claire whispered. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Claire, you didn't just lose me. You threw me away." She flinched. "I made a mistake." I stared at her. Which part was the mistake? Falling for him, lying to me, or letting me find out the way I did? Her face crumpled. All of it. For a second, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep, the days I spent feeling like I wasn't enough. And I realized I didn't need her apology. Not anymore. "I don't hate you, Claire," I said finally. Her eyes widened. "You don't? Number, but I don't forgive you either." She swallowed hard, nodding. "I guess that's fair." "Yeah," I said softly. "It is." And with that, I turned and walked away. This time, for good. The last goodbye to my old life. That night, I sat outside staring up at the sky. I had spent so much time grieving. For Ethan. For Claire. For the life I thought I had lost. But now, I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't looking back, because for the first time in months, I was excited for what came next. I pulled out my phone and texted Jake. "That wasn't a real date, was it?" His reply came almost instantly. "Nope, but the next one will be." And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because I finally knew. This was just the beginning. Some love stories end in happily ever after. Mine didn't. Mine ended in betrayal, heartbreak, and loss. But maybe that wasn't the end at all. Maybe it was just the beginning of something better. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to love me. I was learning to love myself again. The last goodbye to my past. The day after I saw Claire, I woke up feeling lighter. Not because I had forgiven her. Not because I had forgotten what she did. but because I didn't care anymore. She wasn't my problem. Ethan wasn't my problem. I had spent months drowning in their choices. Now, I was finally making my own. So that afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I texted Ethan, not because I wanted him back, not because I needed closure, but because I was finally ready to end this chapter for good. Meet me at the park, one last time. His response came almost instantly. Okay. The final conversation. He was already sitting on the bench when I arrived. He looked hesitant, like he wasn't sure what to expect. Hey, he said softly. I nodded, sitting beside him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I took a deep breath. I'm not here to fix anything, I said. I just needed to say a few things. He nodded slowly. Go ahead. I turned to face him, feeling calmer than I thought I would. I loved you, Ethan. I really did. He swallowed hard. I know. And for a long time, I thought you were my forever. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I thought you were mine too. I shook my head. No, you didn't. Because if you did, you wouldn't have left me for her. His face fell. I didn't mean to hurt you. Stop saying that, I said, my voice steady. You did hurt me, but I'm not mad anymore. Because now, I see it for what it was. He looked at me, confused. And what was it? I smiled sadly. A mistake I was meant to learn from. Ethan's jaw tensed, but he nodded. I miss you, he admitted. For the first time, those words didn't hurt me anymore. I just sighed. I don't miss you. His breath hitched. You don't? I shook my head. Not anymore. He didn't argue, because we both knew the truth. Whatever we had, it was gone. For good, so I stood up, looked at him one last time, and said the words I should have said months ago. Goodbye, Ethan. And then I walked away. The moment I knew I was free. That night I stood on my balcony, watching the stars. For the first time in a long time, my chest didn't feel heavy. My heart didn't ache. I wasn't waiting for a text that wouldn't come. I wasn't replaying memories I wished I could forget. I wasn't holding on to something that wasn't mine anymore. I was just free. And it felt good. A new chapter begins. The next day, I got a text from Jake. Dinner tonight? I hesitated for a second, not because I didn't want to go, but because for the first time, I wasn't looking at him as a replacement. I wasn't trying to fill the empty space Ethan left behind. I was just excited. So I smiled, typed a reply, and hit send. Pick me up at 7. The real love story. That night, as I got ready for my date, I finally understood something. This was never really a story about Ethan and Claire. It wasn't even a story about Jake. It was a story about me. About learning that love should never make you feel second best. That trust, once broken, never feels the same again. That sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from the people who don't value you. And that the real love story is the one you build with yourself. Because before you can give your heart to someone else, you have to know who you are without them. And now, I finally did. The end.